and record it to my computer.
All right.
All right. So let me just go one more time to Facebook. Last time, and then we're going to start, everybody. Sorry about this.
New Zealand, she's from America, he's from Sydney, so we have no chance.
Oh, it just keeps. What's this?
I need two things: the musician and the official government role he held in Darwin.
What is that?
Yes. Slim Duckling was the official wearer of hats. Wrong and wrong,
I can hear a lot of other sound.
Yes, it must be somebody who has their TV on or something.
Okay. It does say it's recording.
Yeah, it's recording now on my computer. Okay, we're gonna just continue. So let me mute everybody, and we'll get underway. So it's going to record to my computer.
So we couldn't.
Bev. So Bev, you now unmuted. So welcome everybody, and apologies for the delay. We were just trying to get it onto Facebook, but I don't know, technology's been a pain. And welcome back. So hope you enjoy, and we are recording it to my computer, so we'll post the recording, I guess, somewhere where people can watch at a later time. So thank you, Bev, again for joining us, and I'll hand over the keys to you. Have a good cheer, everyone.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to be back again this week. It's Yom Ha'atzmaut tonight, so tonight is a good happy night. Last week we had just finished Yom Shoah, which was a really sad time. So tonight is the last night of the series. It is the Spanish narrative, part 4. I'll share the screen in a moment, and you'll be able to have a look at the slideshow. Or PowerPoint slideshow would be, much nicer. But last week we looked at the expulsion from Spain, and we left off in 1492, in August 1492, with the Jews of Spain being expelled. They'd gone through a horrible 100 years, and they needed to go somewhere. So we were talking last week what would happen if you were expelled from Australia, and they gave you 3 months to leave, where you would go. So these days we'd probably say, well, we could go to Israel. But in those days, there was nowhere to go if you were Jewish. No one really necessarily wanted you. And life for Jews in many other places was really terrible. People had been in Spain for 500 years. Jews had been in Spain for 500 years and had been very happy and very successfully living there for a long period of that time. Things did get very, very tough in the last 100 years before the expulsion, but they didn't necessarily want to go. And the choice was convert or leave. No Jews were allowed in Spain or in any Spanish territory, for that matter, after 1492. There was the Alhambra Decree. So no Spanish territory. And by then, Spain was actually already becoming quite involved in taking other ports and other cities, and was about to embark on its period of exploration and navigation, certainly to the western world. Columbus departed in 1492, around the same time as the Jews left. So the Jewish people living in Spain had to make a decision where to go if they weren't going to convert. And by now, if they hadn't converted, the chances of them converting in Spain was quite small, because they had had much opportunity to convert until now. But the ones that had decided to leave had to make a decision where to go. Now, it's not like you've got a whole lot of family living in another country, or you can be that picky and choosy. A lot of people literally walked from their town, or took a mule or took a cart, got to the nearest port and got on a boat to wherever. So there were boats that had arrived. They knew that Jews were being expelled from Spain, and there were boats that were arriving from North Africa. There were boats from Italy, and there were boats from the Ottoman Empire. They knew that Jews were going to come, and so sailors had arrived with their boats. You couldn't necessarily, book your boat before, and of course people were not allowed to leave with gold or silver or jewels. They may have had some, in secret, but you weren't necessarily leaving with money. So if you had not taken out your money out of the country before, the chances are you were leaving in dire poverty and literally with what you had packaged to take with you. Yes. Eva said, so they were boat people. So absolutely 100%, the Jews leaving Spain were boat people. Okay, so when we hear of refugees floating around looking for a place to go, that was us, 100%. And we were at the mercy of other countries being ready to take us in, and many 100%. And so, many didn't want to take us, and many turned us away. And it were literally like floating around the Mediterranean looking for a spot. It was dangerous. It was you were at the mercy of the captain of the boat. So there were many Jews that were sold into slavery. There were many Jews that were traded for other things. There were many Jews that drowned at sea because they took the money or the fare and then left and went back for the next group, or just left anyway. So so we should have sympathy for boat people, because we have been there actually multiple times throughout our history. But this time for sure, there are still pictures that artists painted in Spain, and certainly in Portugal as well, showing Jews standing at the harbour waiting to get on a boat, and literally hundreds of boats in the harbour, and Jews were floating off to they didn't quite know exactly where. So this is where we left off last week. I'm going to share the screen and hopefully I can unshare it. All right, here we go. I'm going to share this one with you. This is Spanish narrative, and we are now in the screen here, where we are literally floating somewhere in the Mediterranean Sea. So let's say you have a choice and you can get on a boat. Now, you might want to go to, if you're being a bit picky and choosy, you might want to go to Europe. Europe is tricky. I mean, the best place to go in Europe at the moment for Jews in 1492 would be Italy. Okay, Italy was made up of papal states plus other states. So you've got Venice, and you've got Naples, and lots and lots of kingdoms and states within Italy. It's not one big country. So Italy could be quite nice, but you needed money to go to Italy. Not everyone could go to Italy. Germany, again, wasn't one big country. It was many different principalities, and Jews had been expelled from most of them by the time 1492 came along. So very difficult to go to Germany. Parts of France, Jews hadn't been expelled from everywhere in France, but parts of France for sure you couldn't go. The Ottoman Empire had just opened up, 1453. You had Mehmed II taking Constantinople, and so the Ottoman Empire was open for Jews, but it was like the other end of the Mediterranean from Spain. From Spain, they were European, they were Western, and they were thinking, oh, Ottoman Empire is very Eastern, not so sure about Ottoman Empire. But the Ottoman Empire was open for Jews, and we're going to talk in depth about the Ottoman Empire a little bit later on. So you could get on a boat and maybe choose, but maybe not. Now, there were many Jews that decided to stay in Spain because it was too hard to go, either if they were old and they couldn't go, or if they had very young kids, or if they were very wealthy and they decided that they just would rather, you know, live the life they knew than the life they didn't. And the life of a refugee, as we know, is a very, very difficult life. So some did choose to stay in Spain. If they stayed in Spain, they had to convert, and then they had the choice of then, you know, becoming completely Christian, which was Catholic in Spain, and then facing the Inquisition if they deviated or, you know, in any way from the church, or becoming very, very secret crypto Jews. But of course, you know, they had watched certainly the last 20 years of the Inquisition, and they knew what the Inquisition meant. So that was a big risk, but of course there were people that stayed in Spain. The other option, of course, was Portugal. Now, Portugal seemed like the logical option for most people, and that is why the majority of people that left Spain went to Portugal. So again, last week we spoke about the numbers that we really weren't sure exactly how many Jews left Spain, but we think there were 300,000 that left. But I mean, I've seen numbers ranging anywhere from 120,000 to 300 and something thousand. So, you know, we don't know. Donita Cabral had said 300,000, so I'm going to go with the 300,000 in his documentation, and he left at the time, so I'm hoping that number's fair. If we say 300,000 left, 120,000 of those went to Portugal, so that's huge. Now, Portugal at the time, I'm going to put this map on so you can get an idea of where Jews were floating around in the Mediterranean. Here's Spain. I hope you continue pointing to things. So here's Spain and Italy. Portugal's just here, you know, right next to Spain, and that is logical. Now, Portugal had said you need money to get in, and so Jews had, if they had money or they could borrow money, some of the wealthy Jews did actually fund poorer Jews to go to Portugal. And Doneta Cabral had actually made a lot of negotiations with the Portuguese king, and I'm going to pronounce it, and I know I'm going to get it wrong. I've been trying to practice it all day. It's King Juan II, King John II of Portugal. I listened to how to pronounce Juan like multiple times, and I'm still probably wrong. So anyway, it is spelt in a very interesting way, but we're going to call him King Juan. The negotiations had happened with King Juan, and he allowed in a certain amount of people. Now, he made some very interesting laws. Basically, I'm going to stop the share here. Basically, what he said was, you can come for 8 months. After 8 months, I will give a visa, like a permanent residence visa, to those families that can afford. It was quite a lot of money. It was 100. It's called cruzados, 100 cruzados. If you could afford that, you could stay. You had to be very wealthy to afford that. But if you had 8 cruzados, you could just come, but you only had 8 months to stay. And then he said, look, it's not a problem. You know, Portugal, we're a serious, you know, navigating country. We're full of ships. You can hire a ship from Portugal and be from Portugal. Just buys you an extra 8 months of time. So it sounds like a good plan, right? So the Jews, of course, you know, many of them went to Portugal. He gave in 650 families got visas. 650 families, and craftsmen or people that were very good with navigation or had certain skills that the Portuguese government wanted, they got visas. The rest, that's like, you know, the majority, didn't. And after 8 months, there were no ships. So there were no ships for them. So he said, well, I'm sorry, I don't have ships. So you either pay now that 100 cruzados, or you are slaves for me. And of course, they became his slaves. So the majority of Jews that went to Portugal by 1493, that's 1 year later, were living as slaves in Portugal to King Juan II. Okay, now this is what he does. In 1493, he kidnaps 2,000 Jewish children from the slave group and sends them to an island which Portugal had just recently discovered called San Tomé, and literally sent them there. Now, he said he was sending them there because he wanted them to become Catholic, and it would be much better for them if they were away from their parents. You can imagine the trauma of having left Spain, and now your children have been taken away from you and sent to an island off the coast of Africa. We don't know what happened to those children, other than people called it the Island of Alligators, which doesn't sound very good. And but then again, in 1993, so that's very recently, the descendants of the people that had settled San Tomé, and they said that it was from the 1400s, had like a commemoration service for the time that they were taken away. The legend went that they were taken away from their parents. So that's possibly, the children potentially survived and populated the island of San Tomé. But you can just imagine the trauma that parents then had to face at that time. Anyway, King Juan II died, and his oldest son, who was married to Isabel and Ferdinand's daughter, also called Isabel, interesting, he died too. And now Portugal was left to a man called Manuel. Manuel then became the king of Portugal. He was actually a cousin of King Juan. Okay, Manuel sees all these slaves, Jewish slaves, and he said, I feel very bad for these Jewish slaves, we're going to let them go. And it looks like things are going well for the Jews of Portugal. Anyway, he didn't have a very strong hold on Portugal because he was a cousin of King Juan. And then what happened was he decided he would like to marry Isabel. Now, Isabel is Isabella and Ferdinand's daughter. Isabella and Ferdinand said, well, we'll agree to this marriage on one condition. You can't have any Jews in Portugal. So you get rid of all the Jews in Portugal, and then, then this marriage will go ahead. Now, Manuel was he was very confused. The Jews that had come in were a very wealthy group, and he needed them badly. He was, at that time, Bartholomew Diaz had rounded the Cape, got to the Cape, rounded the Cape, gone to the eastern part of Africa, southern Africa in 1488, and Vasco da Gama was about to start his expedition to go and find the East Indies, and so he was going around the Cape again, around the coast of East Africa, towards India, and that needed to be funded. And that was being funded by, for a large portion of that funding was happening from these Jews that had arrived in Portugal that were supplying him with money. And he was in a big dilemma now. Does he marry Isabel? And then potentially he could then become king of Portugal and Spain, or does he lose these Jews? Because if he expels them, it's his finance is gone. So he came up with a plan, and this he thought was a brilliant plan. It's the most terrible thing that happened for the Jews of Portugal. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see. Here we go. Here's Portugal, hopefully. All right. So this is what he did. He said, okay, you are, so this was in December 1496. He said, from October 1497, all the Jews have to leave, or they can convert. So they can convert with pleasure and live here, But if they want to stay in Portugal, they have to be converted. Otherwise, you've got till October 1497. Now, these are people that had left Spain, that had come to Portugal, because they didn't want to convert. So now, why would they want to convert and stay in Portugal? These were people that had chosen to leave. So the chances of getting them all to convert was actually very small, and he knew this. So in March of 1497, everyone thought they had till October. In March of 1497, on Pesach, he tells everyone they have to come with all their children under the age of 14 to Lisbon, which they duly obeyed. They came to Lisbon, and he said that he is going to take all the children away that are under the age of 14 and send them all to Catholic homes unless the parents convert. So parents did convert, some converted, and some lost their children because they refused to convert. Others they allowed to return home. It was pandemonium, it was trauma. These people have gone through double trauma now, the trauma of leaving Spain, the trauma of coming to Portugal, the trauma of some children being taken away, now the trauma of other children possibly being taken away or taken to other families, and then conversion. So some people did succumb to conversion then, but they waited for October. Other people, October 1497, he told them all to come. Originally, it was like 3 ports they were going to leave from, and he was going to supply the ships. But what happened was he made them all again go to Lisbon, and there were many priests there and baptismal fonts, and they were trying to force everyone to convert. Those that didn't convert were dragged to the baptismal font. There was children that were taken away then. There were, you can just imagine you can imagine what it must have been like. And in the end, so if you relented and you succumbed and you converted on that day, that was one thing. Then if you didn't relent, you got dragged. And if you didn't relent and you still managed to say, I don't want to become Christian, holy water was sprinkled on you, and you said, that's fine, you're all Christian anyway. So from that day, every single Jew in Portugal, whether they wanted to or not, whether they had gone to a baptismal font or not, was Christian. Everyone. And that was October 1497. And he said, we will not have an inquisition here for another, originally he said 10 years, and then he said 30 years. So he said, you have 30 years to settle into your life in Portugal as Christians. You don't have to do it immediately. I'm not going to be checking what you're doing for the next X amount of years, but you are all Christians. And then he promptly said to Isabella and Ferdinand, there are no more Jews left in Portugal, because according to the law, there were no more Jews left in Portugal. And it became very difficult to leave Portugal. Okay, so if you were in Portugal at that time, the advantage of a mass conversion like that compared to Spain, because in Spain it had happened over time and a lot of families had been separated during conversion. So some people decided to convert, other people didn't. It was like a mishmash of who was going to convert, who wasn't. This way, it was a blanket conversion. So everyone was converted. Everyone was converted. But it did mean that they could still keep their families together. No one disliked anyone else for having to convert because it wasn't a choice. They all had to convert. But it did give them time to establish some way of becoming crypto-Jews. So a lot of, and of course, these are people that had left Spain in the majority, so there were people that didn't want to convert. So in the main, in Portugal, even though they were now all Catholic on the outside, they did manage in the main to keep a lot of Jewish identity and keep being crypto-Jews. So the majority of crypto-Jews that we know of certainly today, but for 100 or 200 years even after the expulsions, were Portuguese Jews. Okay, they were crypto-Jews. They even had a name in Europe. They called them the Portuguese nation. The Portuguese nation meant people that were actually Jewish but new Christians. They were calling them new Christians, and on the outside they were behaving completely like Christians. They were getting married in church, but then they would also have a secret Jewish marriage. The majority of them were marrying other Jews. So, you know, in the main, they were actually still saying halachically Jewish, even though on the outside they were Catholic. The Inquisition, of course, came to Portugal in 1558, and when it came big. We have to this day 44,000 records of Inquisition files from Portugal. And that Inquisition was not only in Portugal, it was in any Portuguese owned country. So, you know, the Inquisition was then also in Brazil. The Inquisition was also in Goa, in India. So anywhere that Portugal had taken, there was the Inquisition with it. The same as Spain. So anywhere that Spain had then, any country Spain had conquered, that means, you know, most of South America and certainly Mexico, the Inquisition was very much there as well. Now, how did Jews get out of Portugal? Because, you know, apparently now 20% of Portuguese people actually have Jewish ancestry. That's a huge percentage. But how did Jews get out of Portugal? So I have actually given a few talks on this before, but I'm just going to talk very, very, very briefly on Dona Grazia Mendes and the routes to save literally thousands of crypto Jews. So I'll give you a little synopsis about Dona Grazia. So her Christian name was Beatriz de Luna. Beatriz de Luna had married Francisco Mendes, and in this, you know, big Catholic ceremony, but of course they were both Jews, and seriously crypto Jews, like properly practicing Judaism and home, but on the outside extremely, you know, Catholic. The Mendes family was one of the wealthiest families in Europe, if not the wealthiest, like other than kings or emperors. In terms of wealth, they had giant wealth. Him and his brothers had the trade routes to the east, where they imported spices such as pepper and cinnamon, cloves, any of the spices that were coming through to Antwerp, in Flanders and to Portugal and distributed to the rest of Europe are coming from the Mendes brothers. And she had married one of the Mendes men, Francisco Mendes. When he passed away, the money went to the other brother Diego and to her. Her sister married Diego. So the other thing with this Portuguese nation, with these crypto Jews, is they actually managed to all like somehow marry each other, like whole like families would marry cousins. So that the money would A, stay in the family, that B, they would all stay Jewish, and C, they would sort of all know each other. And she landed up in Antwerp. It's an amazing story. Like I could literally talk for like an hour or two on Dona Grazia Mendes, on Beatriz de Luna. But she was a spectacular woman. But what she managed to do was, eventually Diego dies, she inherits everything. Actually no sister, which kind of interesting. But she inherited everything. She took over running this entire empire. And this empire was funding not just Portuguese navigation, but it was funding Charles V and any, you know, he was the Habsburg emperor at the time, he was the Holy Roman emperor, and any war that he had needed to be funded by the Mendes. So they all knew about this Portuguese nation. Okay, they all knew they were crypto Jews. They couldn't do anything about it because they were funding things for them. And so eventually Diego died, she inherited all the money, and like, you know, everyone was after her money. So King Charles V wanted one of his family to marry her daughter. Of course, that couldn't happen, you know, because her daughter needed to marry another crypto Jew. She ended up escaping from Antwerp to Venice, from Venice to Ferrara, from Ferrara she eventually landed up, I mean, like, she moved. She eventually landed up in the Ottoman Empire with under Suleiman the Magnificent. He actually almost like had to rescue her a couple of times. All her money went there, and she during this time was and the Mendes brothers. So she had learned this from them, from her husband and from her brother-in-law, and eventually her nephew as well, who married a daughter, of course. She actually lands up bringing literally tens of thousands of Jews out of Portugal on a route that went Portugal, Antwerp, Italy, Ottoman Empire, and it was all secret. She funded everything, and managed to get these people to the Ottoman Empire. Some of them landed up staying in Italy. It was unsafe. The journey was fraught with danger. Lots of people didn't make it, but many did make it. And her and her late husband and her brother-in-law and her nephew were responsible. Whose name was also Juan. And we know him as Don Joseph Nassi, Don Joseph Nassi, who landed up becoming the Duke of Naxos. He became, you know, he was really working very closely with Selim II in Constantinople, and actually that you know, all of them managed to bring out Jews from Portugal. So it's an amazing story. Like seriously, that was a synopsis, but incredible story. Okay, so let's move to the Ottoman Empire. Okay, this is still here is a picture of Donna Grazia in her youth. I hope that it's sharing here. Oops, gotta move down. Okay, am I sharing the screen? Let me share the screen. Okay, can you see that? Okay, so here, this is Donna Grazia Mendes, a picture of her at least, and this is just an amazing picture of all the boats having to leave Lisbon, but of course Jews never got on those boats because they were all converted. Before we get onto the Ottoman Empire, which is what I want to talk about now, and I'm watching the time carefully, is there are like some incredible stories of crypto Jews. If I could do another talk maybe on crypto Jews, I should, because some of them are so absolutely unbelievably amazing in what they did and how they lived that they are worth mentioning. The one I have to mention is Louis de Carvalhal, who was born in Spain, moved to Portugal, landed up going back to Spain, landed up in Mexico, and he was unfortunately caught by the Inquisition. He was a crypto Jew, caught by the Inquisition, and his whole family were killed by the Inquisition in Mexico in the 1500s. But he wrote a diary which documented just about everything, his whole journey towards Judaism, which was incredible, because when you read, and I have read his diary and I've read a lot of stuff on him, but Louis de Carvalhal, when you read how he saw Judaism, you can understand how it would have been in a place where there are no Jews, like Spain. Portugal is a little bit different because, of course, there were still crypto Jews, but in Spain there were no rabbis, there were no Jewish books, there was nothing. So if you knew you were Jewish, you didn't really know what you were supposed to do. You just knew you were Jewish. The only access you had to any books were non-Jewish books. So you had access to a Bible. So he would like read the Bible and try and like figure out like what it was to be Jewish, what he was supposed to be doing. And of course, there's no Talmud, or there's no interpretation of the Bible. So his form of Judaism is kind of like it's kind of like Christianity that's Jewish. It's very bizarre, and it is so sad. And his faith that he has in like that Hashem is going to help him and look after him is like incredible. It's definitely worth reading his diaries. And in his diary, he was hoping to go to Italy. He thought he would get to Italy, and the Inquisition caught him. And unfortunately, they got this diary, and that implicated him in everything, because he had just written everything down in the diary that he believed. And so he was guilty because the diary just proved everything. But they kept the diary, and so we've got access to the diary today. As we've got access to all these Inquisition records, you can read his entire trial if you want to. Louis de Carvajal, you get to hear about it. Okay, Ottoman Empire. Okay, so Ottoman Empire. I've got notes here, but I haven't read any of them. I don't even know where the notes are at this stage. All right. So we are now in the Ottoman Empire. Now, do you remember I said that in 1453, the Ottoman Empire, Constantinople had been taken over. It's now Istanbul. It's been taken over by it was Mehmet II. We've had a number of different leaders. By the time 1492 comes along, the leader is Bayezid II. And he actually sent boats to Spain in 1492 to go and collect Jews. And they were welcoming Jews into this new empire that they were forming. Now, Jews had already been living in the Ottoman Empire. You can see how big, you can see how big the Ottoman Empire is. It's massive. If you look at this map, there had been Jews, of course, living in the Ottoman Empire, since 1300 when it started, and they were Romaniot Jews, so they were mostly Greek-speaking Jews. They had been living in the Byzantine Empire before. It was very tough for Jews living in the Byzantine Empire. It was very, very vehemently anti-Semitic. Once the Ottoman Turks took over, it was much, much better for Jews. It was usually much better for Jews living under Islam. They had dhimmi status in the Ottoman Empire. They were essentially left alone as long as they didn't, step out of line. They were successful in business. They were not restricted in professions. They could really do, as long as they behaved themselves. The Ottomans were great. And especially in the early years, it was a real golden age for Jews living in the Ottoman Empire in the early years. And remember, I said they were Romaniot community. So what the Ottomans did was, when Mehmet took over Constantinople, it was horrible, and he decided what he would do, be economically useful for the state, to move them into Constantinople. And so Jews were a bit upset that they had been moved out of, Adrianople, and they'd been moved from different places, from the Balkans. There were a lot of Jews living in the Balkans at that stage. They were upset they'd been moved to Constantinople, but it didn't harm them in any way. It moved them, and they had these Romaniot communities there in Constantinople. When the Spaniards started to arrive, got all these Sephardim now coming. They've got their own, you know, they've got their own way of doing things. Their traditions were quite different from the Romanite tradition, and so you landed up in Istanbul, about 30,000 Jews with 44 shuls. So you know, it should be 30,000 Jews, 30,000 shuls, but you know, all different shuls of all different types, and the Romanians and the Sephardim were, you know, they got on, but they were quite distinct. They tended not to sort of like marry each other even, or mingle for a long time. Also, the Romanians were not necessarily, like, they were a merchant class, and was sort of like middle class, whereas some of the Sephardim that arrived there, I mean, you know, Donna Grazia had gone to go and live in Galata on the Golden Horn, you know, in Istanbul. You know, this is a picture here of Topkapi Palace. It was magnificent. Istanbul became a magnificent city. This is a picture of Suleiman the Magnificent, who was very close to Donna Grazia. And yeah, so, you know, the Romanian community sort of living in sort of less wealthy areas, and you've got some of these very wealthy Sephardim, you know, living extremely wealthy lives and extremely well in you know, in Istanbul, and they had their own shuls and their own tradition. So it wasn't necessarily a very cohesive community, but it was one of the best places to be if you were Jewish, living at that time. Salonika in the Ottoman Empire became, you know, probably the strongest Jewish community in the Ottoman Empire. There were 20,000 Jews there in the early 1500s, and it just developed further and further and further. Unfortunately, many of the Sephardi communities that lived in the Ottoman Empire, unfortunately, the Second World War and the Holocaust destroyed many of those Sephardi communities. That's really what happened to them. The Jewish communities in the Balkans, the Jewish communities in Salonika and Thessaloniki, in Greece, anywhere that had been part of the Ottoman Empire, other than Turkey, actually was you know, the Jews, the Sephardi Jews of, unfortunately, many perished in the Holocaust. And okay. The next important thing to know with the Ottoman Empire, of course, in 1516, and stop sharing here. And in 1516, the Ottomans took Jerusalem, and so we have the first settlement of Jews in you know, in Eretz Israel, and so Jerusalem, which had 70 families by the turn of the century, you know, the 16th century, had 70 families. By the time the Ottomans come in there, you know, there's now like 1,500 families living in Jerusalem. There have been 300 families in Sfat before, and there were 2,000 Jews. And these are mostly Sephardim that are coming. So, so in 1492, you could not go to Israel. You couldn't go to Jerusalem. You could not go to Sfat. It was under the Mamelukes at the time, and it was not at all safe for the Jews to go. But once the Ottomans took it in 1516, it became, you know, very safe to go and live in Israel. So, and tonight is Yom HaTzmaut. So that was, I guess, that was the beginning of settlement in Israel, 1500s. All right, and the other place that you could go, other than the Ottoman Empire, was Italy. Okay, so I'm going to just go back into my Zoom and try and share this with you. Here we go. Share. All right. Italy. Okay, Italy. All right. Okay, so Italy, if you were wealthy, Italy was a good place to go. And of course, Jews had been living in Italy since you know, since the destruction of the Second Temple, when Jews had been taken to Rome. So there were very well-established Jewish communities in Italy, and they were fairly affluent. It did depend, of course, who the Pope was at the time. So if you had a Pope that was, you know, that was happy to have his Jews there and was, you know, well disposed to Jews, then you would get, you know, good times with Jewish communities there in Italy. If you had a Pope that disliked Jews, that wanted to get rid of Jews, that wanted to expel Jews, because things then were terrible for Jews. So Jews in Italy really were at the mercy of the Pope in the papal, certainly in the papal states. Venice was a good place for Jews to live at most times. Of course, they were the first ghetto in 1517, and so it sounds like Venice was not good because it had a ghetto. But of course, Jews had been expelled from so many other places in Europe that they actually couldn't live in any place. Of course, they could live in Venice. They had to live in the ghetto, and it wasn't nice in the ghetto at all. But they could work in the rest of Venice, and actually, after a while, the ghetto became like quite a trendy place, and many Venetians would come, and non-Jewish Venetians would come and hang out in the ghetto and mix with Jews. So Venice actually became a really good place for Jews. Certainly Ferrara was good for Jews for a long time, under the Duke of Este, Ercole d'Este, the first and the second. It was very good for Jews. In 1492, Jews could, of course, go to the Kingdom of Naples. Naples actually took in Don Yitzhak Abravanel. Remember, we spoke about him, and last week, and he actually worked for the King of Naples, and so Naples was actually a good place for Jews at that time. Soon after, actually, Spain took Naples. And so all the Jews were expelled because, of course, you couldn't live in any Spanish territory if you were actually Jewish. So Jews then went to the Papal States, which at that stage was under Alexander VI, and he was a pope that actually liked Jews, so he invited Jews to come and live in the Papal States. Jews were living in Florence, as I said before, Ferrara, and in 1555, we get a pope that doesn't like Jews, and so we get Jews having to live in the ghetto in Rome. This picture at the bottom here is actually the ghetto in Rome, not in Venice. Those of you that have been to Rome know that's kind of cool in the ghetto. There is the best food in that Roman ghetto, but at the time it wasn't so nice at all living in the ghetto. Of course, Italy had the Soncino printing press, the Soncino printing house. Those of you that have gone to Venice, that have seen the Venetian ghetto, there are some magnificent shuls. There's 5 shuls in the Venetian ghetto. But this picture I've got here is of the Spanish shul, the Sephardi shul in Venice. So we know that it's magnificent. Been in there, it's beautiful. We know that this was, this was a big Sephardi community, certainly a good place for Sephardim to go. But as I said before, because Italy was not one big country, it was lots of states and kingdoms. So once if you were expelled from one state, you could go to another state. That was the beauty of being in Italy. You could sort of move around, and it was usually good in Ferrara until there was a giant earthquake, and then it was not good in Ferrara. But after Italy, a lot of Jews then moved to the Ottoman Empire, which is very close. And so even if you look at that picture, the Ottoman Empire is, just across the sea. So a lot of Jews did then move to the Ottoman Empire from there. If you didn't go to Italy, so that was in Europe, really, Italy, what's your choice? You could go, I mean, the closest place to Spain is Morocco. And Morocco was a logical place to go for many Jews, because it was, of course, we learned many weeks ago about the Almohads. It was very bad under the Almohads, but the Almohads were long gone. We had the Marinids since then, and there was a new dynasty now in Morocco, which was very favorable to Jews. So actually it was quite good if you could get to Morocco. The problem was that Portugal actually occupied quite a lot of the ports in the north of Morocco, and that's where you're coming from. So if you're coming from Spain, it was quite hard to get into the interior in Morocco. Most of the Jews that wanted to get to Fez. Fez had a very, very strong, learned community. Fez was the place to be at that stage, and many Jews tried to make their way to Fez. A lot didn't get there and had to turn around and go back to Spain. Some got to Fez. They were so sick by the time they got there that they were not allowed to enter, and many Jews actually died outside of Fez trying to get into Fez. But those that did get in were actually well integrated into the community, and actually life in Morocco was actually very, very good for Jews for a long time. You know, really until sort of the mid 1800s, there were a number of wars, but certainly at this time, it was good for Jews. And the Jewish community, the Sephardi community, really did thrive in Morocco. The other place that Jews did go, but not for a while, so not 1492. Later, so in the 1500s, was the Netherlands. This is a picture of the Portuguese shul in Amsterdam. Those of you that have been there, I have been there. I've sat in one of those seats, and it's amazing to see. It's the original Portuguese shul. It still has got candles. It doesn't use electrical lights, and their services are still held, and they still have in their Sidura Portuguese, even though it's in the Netherlands. And so the Netherlands, of course, you couldn't go in 1492. It was ruled by Spain, so you couldn't go there. But once the Netherlands became, it got rid of Spain, it became free of Spain, and under William of Orange. Once the House of Orange was there, it was much more conducive for Jews to be in the Netherlands. Goodness, I can't spell Netherlands. Look at that. Okay, I just noticed it now. Netherlands. But the once the House of Orange took over, it was actually good in the Netherlands, and the Sephardi community properly thrived in the Netherlands. It became very wealthy. Of course, they had much knowledge of navigation. They had helped to run the exploration routes in Portugal. They helped establish the Dutch East India Company. They helped establish the Dutch West India Company, were very influential in the Dutch West India Company, which was actually routes to Portugal, to Brazil. And in Brazil, of course, they set up the sugar trade in Brazil, and that was really started by crypto Jews. You couldn't go to Brazil if you were actually if you were Jewish, but you could certainly go to Brazil as a crypto Jew. The Jews that came to the Netherlands in the beginning were crypto Jews, but once they stayed in the Netherlands, they became Jewish quite quickly. In Brazil, there were a few little Dutch colonies in Recife in Brazil, which was so Jews for sure could practice Judaism there. But then once Portugal took it over again, the Jews had to leave there, because you could, of course, be a new Christian, but you couldn't be a practicing Jew for a long time. So, of course, the Americas, South America and North America, of course, were also populated by new Christians, by crypto Jews, and eventually by practicing Jews as well. And so the Sephardim actually landed up going everywhere around the world. Now I know that I'm going to have to finish very, very soon. So thought and culture. I mean, the dispersion of the Spanish Jewry, it's led to various forms of cultural sort of revolutions in the Jewish world. You can't go from being a crypto Jew to a Jew very easily. I'm going to stop sharing here. the thought process of the crypto Jews having been exposed to other religion, to another religion, to other people, it was very difficult to then go straight back into becoming a mainstream Jew. So you've got all these crypto Jews coming back to Judaism in various forms, shapes, and sizes. So Judaism, after the Sephardim had entered the rest of the world, obviously if they hadn't converted out and they were still Jewish, they integrated very much easier into mainstream other Jewish communities. Very often they had their own Jewish communities, but for crypto Jews coming back into the fold was not easy. It was not easy for them. It was not easy for other Jewish communities. Also, they weren't quite sure what to do with these crypto Jews. And as I said before, you know, once you've been exposed to another religion and had to practice Christianity overtly, and then suddenly now you're losing Christianity completely and you're becoming mainstream Jewish, it causes a lot of confusion, a lot of identity issues, and so you have this in the Sephardi world after the expulsion. But you do have many Jews just, you know, coming straight back and becoming very involved in other communities. As I said before, setting up their own communities. So I mean, we still have Sephardi communities today. You know, it's like 500 years after the expulsion from Spain, but they still, you know, they're still Sephardim. They still very much identify with their Spanish heritage. The trauma of the expulsion for many Jews was generational trauma. Like, you know, after the Holocaust, you get generational trauma, and after the expulsion from Spain, you get generational trauma as well. So this stuck with people for a very long time and caused issues within the community. And the fact that you get very soon after the expulsion from Spain, that you get a whole spate of false messiahs, means that you have a lot of people looking for something, you know, searching for Mashiach, searching for Messiah in the light of the terrible events and terrible trauma that had happened to them. So shortly afterwards, you know, you've got David Ravani, you know, coming from across the Sambatyon River, you know, trying to tell the Pope that he's come to, you know, rescue Israel from the Ottomans, and Shlomo Malka, you know, a Portuguese man who crypto Jew who then converts. They land up, you know, they end up being killed by Charles. That's certainly Shlomo Malka. We don't quite know exactly what happened to David Ravani, but the fact that you get all these false messiahs straight after the expulsion, you know, culminating in Shabtai Tzvi in 1666. You know, he was the big false messiah. But all of these issues, all of these problems come from this generational trauma of, you know, like these terrible things have happened. What does it mean? What, you know, what's going to become of us? Are we going to be able to continue with Judaism? Look what we've gone through. Are we going to, you know, are we going to be able to continue? And what is the meaning of all of this? We've got the development of Kabbalah really coming to its you know, heights in Sfat in the 1600s. You know, mysticism, trying to explain things, trying to look at the world in a different way. That's coming from the Sephardim. That's coming from people trying to explain what had happened and trying to work out, you know, what their purpose in life is. So, and at the same time, you know, you've got also changes happening in Judaism. Then, and you've got Renaissance, you've got Enlightenment. All of this is coming from different ideas that have come from different people from around the world. So the influence of the Sephardim is huge. they have a lasting legacy on the Jewish population around the world, on Ashkenazim as well. Some Sephardim actually went to Ashkenaz countries. They even landed up in Poland and in Lithuania and joined into Ashkenazi mainstream Jewish communities. So we have their influence all around us all the time. And I hope this series has been educational and interesting, and that you've learned a lot. And if there's any questions that you have, or I've tried to summarize tonight in a short time. I could have literally spoken for an hour on each of these countries and on more, but you've got to cut it somewhere. So if you have any questions, ask, and I hope I have kept you interested for the last hour.
Thank you very much, Bev. We appreciate it very much. I see Eva wrote an interesting comment that they were boat people. That was earlier when you were talking. Yeah. You saw it, yeah. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to speak to Bev through the week to see what other areas of history we could cover. So please keep posted, and we'll advertise if we are going to do another series. I think everyone would love to do another series. It's just up to Bev if she feels up to it. And thank you for joining us. And yeah, we will resume when we advertise next.